Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Denali Payroll webinar series for April 2nd, 2014. We're going to be going through this webinar here, and as we go through the webinar, if you have any comments or questions, you can go ahead and type those in to the chat. We're going to ask that everybody stay muted throughout the webinar to keep things going since we are on a limited time here. And then at the end, we'll answer any questions that you have typed in the chat. And again, my name is Jeremy Beislein. I'll be your presenter here today, and we're going to be going over the different things of Denali here for today, continuing with the employee setup and maintenance is what our topics are going to be today. Specifically, we're going to be going over the employee benefit deductions, the employee leave codes, the employee direct deposit setup, and there's another option to enter notes for your employees in this setup. So we'll be going over all of those options here today with our Denali Payroll webinar for April 2nd. All right, and with that, we will go ahead and get started here today. So on the last webinar we had last week, we started the employee setup here. We'll go ahead and bring that up here today. Kind of review what we covered last week real quickly here. We're going to find our employee that we were working on last week here. We went over our information, setting up new employees here. We went over that in the General tab. Your year-to-date summary tab shows your year-to-date information. We covered that last week. We also covered setting up the pay rates and the taxes for each employee on last week. Now, to continue for this week, we're going to go on to the next tab here, the benefits and deductions specific for each employee. So in the benefits deduction tab, you've got two sub-tabs. You have your main benefits deduction tab, and then you have your garnishments tab. So we'll start with the main benefit deduction tab. And what you do here is this is where you would add the benefit and the deduction and the addition codes specific to this employee. Now, we've already established these codes in the code setup when we set up your benefit deduction codes for the payroll module, and now you attach those codes to each employee as applicable here in the employee setup screen under the benefits deduction tab here. Now, in order to add a benefit or deduction to each employee, you just click on the Add New Row here. This will bring up the specific employee information for the benefit deduction code we are adding. To bring up the deduction code or the benefit code that we're going to add, you double click on the field here, and this is a list of all of the benefit deduction codes we have already set up in the module and the different class of these codes. As you can see here, we have deduction for this code, benefit for this one here, addition for this one. We talked about what these were, and then now we're going to attach them specifically to the employee. For example, if this employee was to receive commission pay, we've set up a commission code in the module, and now we're going to add the commission code to this employee. And we just select it here, and now we put in the employee-specific information for this commission code that applies to this employee. How much do they get per period on commission? Now, this is set up as a variable amount, so you can set a default amount here, and then you can change this. Since it is variable amount, you can change that every time you run payroll, every week or bi-weekly, or how often you run payroll. If your code has a maximum amount they can earn for this particular code, you can enter that here, the amount remaining that they have left. Once this amount gets to 0, then it stops adding. This code stops applying. You can allocate the codes for this employee specific to all you can allocate all of the expense, the taxes for this addition for one state, or you can split the tax amount for this addition between all the states evenly. Or you can split it by a percentage of their gross pay. And the same with your local tax allocation method as well. How you want to tax this particular code, this benefit deduction or addition for this employee. You can also select which pay periods are applicable for this code. You have up to 5 pay periods per month. If you're on a weekly pay period basis, then you would probably be using all 5 because some months have 5 pay periods. If you're on a bi-weekly, you may only be using the first 3. Semi-monthly, you would only use 2, and so forth. Once we've established all of our benefit deduction codes for this employee, then if you have employees that have a garnishment attached to them, you would go to the Garnishments tab here, and this allows you to set up the garnishment code specific to this employee. You can set up the default garnishment information for this employee here, what the maximum amount would be for this employee. You can also set up a maximum amount if they're in arrears on their garnishment, which can be higher than their regular maximum amount if they're current. You can also set exemptions for how many exemptions they have. If they have 2 exemptions, you can set the multiple here to where it won't withhold the garnishment amount if they're within that exemption amount. You can also set a minimum wage exemption as well for the garnishments. To add the garnishment code that applies to this employee, it's the same way you do for adding the benefit deduction codes. You just click on the Add New Row, and then you bring up the different garnishment codes that have been established in the benefit deduction code setup, select which garnishment applies, and then you would enter the amount per paycheck that will be deducted for this garnishment, or you would enter a percentage of the paycheck to be deducted for this garnishment. You can also add an amount remaining. If there's a maximum amount to be garnished, once that amount is exhausted, the garnishment stops. You can also use a withholding through date. You can garnish their wages up through a certain date. Once you reach this date, Denali Payroll will stop withholding for this garnishment. And you can set these dates as well, when the garnishment was served, when the garnishment is to start, and the withholding date is optional. You can establish as many different garnishment codes as needed for each employee if they have more than one garnishment attached to their paycheck if needed. Now, once you've got the benefits and deductions and garnishments all set up for the employees, one of the neat things about Denali Payroll is you can actually run a report here, and this report actually shows, and since we're in the employee maintenance, this report is only going to be specific to this employee. This report shows the benefit deduction setup for this employee, or if you run it for all employees, it can also run for all employees as well and shows for each one. And it also shows the accumulated amount of benefit or deduction or garnishment for each code that is set up for this employee that has been accumulated year to date. And there's the 4 benefit deduction codes we have set up for this particular employee and the amount that has accumulated. The amount remaining, last amount used, total amount that has accumulated since we started offering these benefits and deductions for this employee. All right, moving on, we go on to our leave codes. The leave codes is what you set up for your vacation time, your holiday time, your paid time off, paid leave codes. We've already set the codes up. Now we attach those codes specific to each employee under the Leaves tab for this employee maintenance. We've got a couple of them already set up for our employee here. And the way you would set up additional leave codes is down in the bottom section where it says Attached Codes. We can click here to attach another leave code to this employee if needed. We double-click on the field to bring up the list of leave codes that we have set up in the module, and we can go ahead and set up one of these leave codes to attach to this employee if needed. You can enter the accrued amount at the time that you're attaching this code to this employee as of today, and once you do that, it brings up the line up here for the different leave types, and it shows the used amount, the remaining amount, and the maximum limit that they can accrue for this particular leave code. Jury duty, let's see, that would be what, 4 days the maximum, so 8 hours a day, we can go 32 hours there for the maximum amount that they can accrue. That would be an example on how to set that up. You can set up leave codes for holiday pay, for paid vacation, for sick pay, paid time off or PTO, as it shows here, just however you want to set that up in your system, and you attach those codes to each employee here. And again, one of the neat things about Denali Payroll is, just like our benefit deduction codes, there's a report you can run for your leave codes as well. Now, since we're in the specific one employee maintenance, this report will be ran for just this one employee. But again, you can run these reports for all employees or a range of employees if needed. And this right here brings up the report that shows the current status of the employees' leave codes. Shows the amount that they are accruing, the current rate that they are accruing, the amount accrued, and the total limit that they can accrue. And down here is the leave type total, the amount accrued, what they have used so far, the remaining amount, and the maximum limit that they are allowed to accrue. All right, so that's how you would set up your leave codes for your employees. The next tab, moving on, is the employee direct deposit. This is where you set up the specific bank accounts to be deposited to when you're running payroll if your employee has direct deposit set up for you. If you want to set up direct deposit for your employees, that is, then you would enter the employee bank account information here. Now, the way to enter that information is you just click on Add New Row, just like adding a leave or a benefit deduction code. And then you would enter the bank account number here. Just make up a number here. You would enter the bank's routing transit number here. That's the 9-digit routing number for your bank. Put zeros in here for this example. You would enter the bank description here. This is for your reference, whatever you want to put here. This is also good to enter whatever you need to have for the employee's reference as well. You can enter the description here, like say if they have an account at Wells Fargo Bank, you could do this for the description, Wells Fargo checking, or whatever you'd like to put there is fine. You would select the type of bank account. Is it either a checking or a savings account? You would select that here. And then you would select the status here. When you first set up a bank account, the default status is inactive. Normally, if your bank requires you to send a pre-note before you can start doing direct deposits to this employee's account, then you would set this status to send pre-note for this bank account. What that does is when the next time you run payroll, it will send a $0 transaction direct deposit into this employee's bank account just to verify that that account is accurate and that the number and the routing number are accurate and that the account information is correct. After you process that payroll and Cougar Mountain Denali Payroll has sent that pre-note, then the system will automatically change the status to pre-note sent. So that when you come in here to the employee maintenance, you will see we've already sent a pre-note on this employee. Once the account has been verified through your bank, then you can come and change the status to active. And starting with the next payroll, it will actually deposit their paycheck into this bank account as it's set up here when this is set to active. Now, one of the nice things about Denali Payroll is today there's a lot of banks that do not require the pre-note to be sent. So with Denali Payroll, you can bypass the send pre-note process, and you can go directly to active when you're setting up a bank account for an employee. You can set that status directly to active, and that will start depositing their paycheck into this bank account with the very next payroll run that you do. And you don't have to go through the pre-note process if your bank doesn't require it anymore. For those of you who have professional payroll, you had to go through that pre-note process, but now with Denali Payroll, you no longer have to do that. The option is there if your bank requires it, but you don't have to do that. You can set that directly to active if the bank does not require it. right, and if you don't know if your bank requires pre-notes to be sent or not, you'll need to contact your bank. That is something that your bank would know, not the employee's bank, but your bank that you process your direct deposits through when you're setting up the transaction. So contact your bank to ask them if pre-notes are required or not. All right, and then you would establish, are we going to deposit a specific dollar amount out of each check into this account? Or are we going to deposit a percentage of the paycheck into this account? And the percentage is a percentage of the net pay, is what that is. If you want to deposit the entire paycheck, you just enter that in as 100%. Now with this employee, as you can see, we've got 4 different bank accounts set up because of course Denali Payroll allows you to split their paycheck up into different bank accounts. And you can deposit the percentage, or you can deposit the paycheck to different accounts and allocate whatever percentage to each account as you need to do here. Or the dollar amount if you set a specific dollar amount to go to that particular bank account. Now the total for all bank accounts does not have to be 100% on your direct deposit. You can set that up to where it is less than 100%. For example, you can have 75% of your employee's check being deposited to the various bank accounts. The remaining 25% will just print out on a regular paper check if you have it set up that way. So if you don't have 100% set up, then it will just print out the remaining percentage of their check onto a paper check for you. Or if you have dollar amounts set up, specific dollar amounts, if the dollar amount is less than their total paycheck, the total dollar amount that's going to all of the bank accounts is less than what their total net pay is, the remaining dollar amount will print out on a paper check. Now you can do a variation of dollar amounts and percentages. For example, if you want $500 to go to a specific checking account, and then the rest of the check, whatever that amount is, to go to a different account, you would set the second account for the remaining amount as priority 2, and you would set that at 100%. Since the top account as priority 1 has the $500, it will take the $500 out and deposit that to account 1, and the remaining at 100% of the remaining will be deposited to account 2. If the total net pay is less than $500, of course the entire check will go to account 1 with nothing remaining to go to account 2. That is how the direct deposit works with Denali Payroll. And you can establish the priority of which account gets the paycheck first, and whatever's left over from this will go to the next one. If there's any left over after both of these, it goes to the third one, and any left over after all 3 will go to the fourth one, and so forth. Another feature of Denali Payroll is you can set up as many bank accounts as you need to for each employee. You can have an unlimited number of bank accounts. So by adding another bank account, we just click on the Add New Row and set up the account information, and it just puts it at the bottom of the list. Now, if you need to move an account as a top priority after you've added it, you just drag it and move it up here to the top. Now, this one that was at the bottom is at the top, and it moved the others down 1 spot for the priority of where the direct deposit goes first. So that's how you would set up your direct deposits. The final employee setup tab is your notes tab. Basically, this tab allows you to enter anything you want to about each employee. If there's something you need to enter in, some specific notes you need to enter in about this particular employee, you can enter that here. And you can enter as many notes as needed. When you are adding a note, if you want to put a date and time on when the note was added, you can click the timestamp button here, and it automatically puts in the date and time before you start typing your note. And you can do that as many times as needed when you come in here anytime in the future to add additional notes as needed for this employee. You can do that. The text search allows you to search through the notes field for a specific word or phrase if you're looking for something that's in here. All right, and that completes the employee setup. That's how you would set up each employee in the Denali Payroll module. And once you've got all of your employees set up and have all the codes attached to the employees through the various tabs that we went through, then you are now ready to start processing payroll, which we'll talk about that on our next webinar. So with that, we'll go ahead and bring up the chat to answer the questions that we have here. I'll try to get through as many questions as I can. We've only got about 8 minutes left, so I'll try to get through as many as I can. If I don't get through all of your questions, then check back on the website because we will post the remaining questions and the answers to those questions on the website for you. Okay, and here's a good one here from Pam. She asked, what if commissions are based on sales? Basically, that was if we were to add a commission code, which is an addition code, one of your benefits deduction code. If commissions are based on sales, you would just set that up as a variable amount that you're adding in each paycheck, and you can type in the amount when you process the payroll. And when we get into payroll processing, I'll show you how to enter those variable amounts in for the additions to the paycheck. Another question from Mike, what is the maximum number of leave codes that can be created? In Denali Payroll, there is no limit on that. You can create as many leave codes and attach as many to each employee as you need. All right, a question from Dick here. How is the vacation hours accrued? Is it based on calendar year or hire date, the accrual time frame? We talked about that when we set up the leave codes a couple weeks ago on the webinar. You would set up your accrual here, right here. The accrual is per pay period, per unit, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. And then you would set the accrual rate here. If it's per pay period, how many hours per pay period do they accrue? If it's per unit, what fraction of an hour do they accrue for each hour that they work? That's handy if you have part-time employees or if you have employees that don't work 40 hours every week and you want them to accrue leave time based on how many hours they work. Or if they just do accrue a set amount per month, per quarter, or per year, you can set that here. And that's done in the leave code setup when you're setting up your leave codes. All right, moving on. Okay, another great question from Dick. It says, when the data is converted over, do we have to do pre-notes again? With Denali Payroll, pre-notes are not required. You can set those to active on all of your accounts. And if you convert those from professional payroll, if they're already set to active on your employees, they should automatically convert as active into Denali as well. So no, you will not have to run your pre-note process again. And even when you're setting up new employees, the pre-note process is no longer required. Only if your bank requires it will you have to do that. Question from Roger, how do you determine which banks that don't require pre-notes? Again, that would be determined by your bank that you process your direct deposit transactions through. So you would just need to contact your company bank that you send the direct deposit transaction file to and ask them if pre-notes are required or not. All right, I believe I did answer your other question, Roger. Can you rearrange the priorities on direct deposits? Yes, you can just click and drag those into whatever order you need to. All right, that's a good question from Pam. She's talking about the multiple tax codes within the same state, depending on what their total amount that they earn at the end of the year. I'm going to do some more research on that for you, Pam, and we'll get that answer posted on the website. But for now, I believe what you would do is you would just set the employee at the higher tax code rate and have everything go to that tax code. Like if they get a raise, you would change the tax code for them, and then you would combine that on the W-2. It would combine all of the Oregon tax codes into the one state for you. I'll double check on that for you, though, and make sure that the answer is posted on the website correctly for you. Good question, Roger. What about attachments in your employee setup? We've got the notes, but there's also, like on your other modules, like for vendor setup and accounts payable, customer setup and accounts receivable, there's an attachments option. In Payroll, we don't have that option at this point, but that option will be available in a future release. With our first release, that option is not yet available, but it is coming, so we keep an eye out for that. Another good question, Dick says we have to use the classic view, not the Denali view. Will it all work the same? Yes, that is correct. With the Denali Payroll, you can turn off the navigation view here, turn off all these buttons, and go to the classic view. It'll work the same on the Payroll module as it does on the other modules as well. And that's basically done here in your controller, just like you do on your others. You would just select on Payroll the classical view right there, and that turns off the navigation screen on Payroll, just like it does on your others. All right, I got one more question here from Roger. It says, has Denali done away with the F5 lookup keys for all of the modules? No, I don't believe they have. Let's see if we can make that work on. We'll just grab one of these here, code name. If you hit F5, and there it goes. It pops up there, just like on Professional. You can just click on the F5 for whatever lookup you're looking for, and it should bring up the list, as the same as if you're double-clicking with the mouse. We can double-check that here as well. Benefit deductions here. Let's find an employee here. We add a new row. And then see, normally you would double click with the mouse, or if you hit F5 on the keyboard, it brings up the list of all of your codes. So it does have the same functionality there. All right, and with that, that's all of our questions. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us here for our Denali Payroll webinar. Be sure you keep an eye out for upcoming webinars. Next week is when all of the excitement really starts. We're going to talk about processing payroll next week, the actual process for running your weekly or biweekly payrolls. So be sure to come back next week. Wednesday, it's going to be April 9th at noon Mountain Time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to tune in again for that next week. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to give us a call. You can send your emails in. And of course, you're always welcome to contact your direct sales representative. They've got a lot of information about the new Denali Payroll as well.